Hello, my name's Camilla Elliott. I teach in the Department of English Literature and Creative Writing at Lancaster University. This is a workshop where we're going to look at the relationships between swordplay and wordplay in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, and we're going to be looking at Act 1, Scene 1. In another workshop in this series, An Introduction to the Language in Romeo and Juliet, I discussed how skill with words was an essential part of a man's accomplishments and power in Elizabethan society, using the example of Sir Philip Sidney, who was a soldier, a scholar, a statesman, and a poet, a man of many talents. Now, I sometimes wonder whether the talents required to be good at fighting with swords might not get in the way of being good with words. We tend to sometimes think that in order to be a good fighter, you have to have an instinctive, almost animal physicality, whereas to be good with words, you have to have a sharp mind and a good education. But in the Renaissance, the fighting that went on between men of this class often took the form of swordplay, and you would need the same kind of training in techniques, strategies, and skills that you need to outwit somebody you're fighting with swords with, as you would need to outwit somebody that you're fighting over words with. You need to know your opponent, anticipate his next move, think ahead to the move you'll make, and all kinds of other possible moves, just as you do in a game of chess. You need to strategize with your sword. You need to be skillful and intelligent with it. And with words, you also need to strategize and see what is the best way to defeat my opponent. Both swordsmen and players with words want to win. They want to have the upper hand. And men were trained in both skills in order to have power in society. So here we have Act 1, Scene 1. And we have Samson and Gregory. These are servants of the House of Capulet, but they are armed servants. And like members of gangs today, they are walking around looking for a fight with the Montagues. But before they fight, they engage in a bit of wordplay. And what I want us to look at is the way in which wordplay resembles swordplay, so that one character will throw out a word, the other character will pick up the word, twist it around, change its meaning, and throw it back. And it goes back and forth in that way in many places in the play and in all the plays in Shakespeare. But we're going to look at the way in which wordplay, and we probably shouldn't call it play because it's kind of a contest, it's more like a fight or a battle. Battles with words warm up these two members of the House of Capulet for a sword fight with members of the House of Montague. And the way in which the skills perhaps are somewhat interchangeable. So let's take a look now at some of the wordplay. One of the problems with this scene, which is very funny if you know what all the words mean, is that we don't know what the words mean and we don't have the same phrases in use today. So we have to look them up and we have to work a little bit in order to understand the cleverness of the writing. One of the reasons that language changes is because societies and social practices change. So the phrase will not carry coals. It does mean literally a task that was performed by some of the lowest servants in a household, and these servants are above that rank. But it came to mean we're not going to be humiliated. So we don't have people carrying coals, we don't have very many coal fires anymore, so that has gone out of use. Samson is looking for a fight. He is itching to fight, and he's looking for an excuse to fight. And it might be an insult, some kind of verbal attack that will allow him to fight with his swords. But in the meantime, Gregory decides to have a little word fight with Samson. So he picks up the word coals and the proverb there, and twists it and turns it round and throws it back at Samson. He's taking it literally. No, if we carry coals, then we'll be colliers or coal miners. But it isn't really that literal, because being colliers was also a way of telling someone they were bad. Coal miners typically were covered in black dust. At the time, black was often associated with evil or the devil. And so Gregory is sort of continuing the idea that Samson starts with, is we're not going to be humiliated. And he's saying no, because we don't want to be made to look bad. But Samson, he's so angry, he's so literal. He's a bit like the Joey Tribbiani to Gregory's Chandler Bing, if you've seen the sitcom Friends. And he goes back to try and explain what he meant. I mean, and we be in collar. And again, he's taking that Cole's collier's collar and he's twisting it a bit. But that means anger. We'll draw, meaning we'll draw our swords. Gregory then picks up another proverb that we don't use today, which is the neck in the collar. That was slang for you're going to be put in the hangman's noose. So when he says, "I, while you live, draw your neck out of the collar," he means you want to make sure you avoid the hangman's noose. What we see towards the end of this play, and even in another passage we're going to look at today, is that there was a very strict rule against fighting in the streets. And you could be made to stand in front of a magistrate and charged with fighting in the street for throwing out an insult that started a fight, as well as for fighting. So he's being careful. Then Samson kind of gives up. He's not going to continue that banter, that back and forth battle over the words and how we're going to use them and what we're going to make them mean. And so he starts out another word. And again, he's making the same literal point again, meaning if you make me angry, if you move me to anger, I'm going to strike quickly with my sword. And again, Gregory makes fun of him. There's a long passage between this. Some of it's quite bawdy, so I've cut that out. I don't know what your school thinks about that sort of thing. But anyway, what we'll do is we'll go now to the last line. And he takes the word moved to mean running away. So he's basically saying, you're a bit of a coward. You're going to run away. Okay, what I want you to do now is to do a bit of thinking and reflecting, or if you're with someone, a bit of discussing. I have some questions for you. Where do you see battles of words taking place today? Maybe in politics or on social media, television entertainment. I think of James Corden's Drop the Mic. I've seen rap battles, tweets. That's sort of social media, but that's a real place of wordplay. Or anywhere else. And I want you to think about how these word battles resemble or are different from the word battles we've just been looking at. Do they use the same kind of strategies? Is there the same kind of one-upmanship? Or is it just a barrage of insults? So look up some of these videos, look up some tweets, think about some of the political debates, look at the use of language in the House of Commons or in whatever government is in your country, and think about how this goes on and connect it to what we've just been looking at. So pause the video and take some time to do this, and then when you're ready, come back and we'll continue. As the scene continues, Samson and Gregory meet two members of the Montague household, Abraham and Balthazar, who are also armed servants. Abraham is also looking for a fight. He's looking for an insult that will give him an excuse to draw his sword. But what's striking to me in this exchange, and we're going to see the details in a minute, is how much less comfortable and clever they are with words when they meet the rival gang. The exchange is a lot like schoolyard banter, playground insults. They echo each other's words. They don't twist and change the meaning, but they change the order around, sort of like looking in a mirror inverts the two sides of what's on the other side. It's kind of like throwing a ball back and forth. There's a lot of yeses and nos, very simple, simple language. And I think here it's not at all difficult to understand what they're talking about. There aren't any words here that we may not be using today, maybe swashing for swashing blow, but we still kind of know what that means. Abraham is as determined as Samson to take offense, and he's got some reason to do so because Samson is biting his thumb, which is like flipping the bird. It's an obscene gesture. Do you bite your thumb at us, sir? Samson's not quite ready to start a fight, so he only half answers, I do bite my thumb, sir. And Abraham says again, do you bite your thumb at us, sir? Not very much wordplay here. There's a kind of rigidity and perhaps a fear. Samson is worried about that collar, that hangman's noose, so he asks Gregory, is the law on our side if I say I? And Gregory says no. So then Samson has to back down, but not completely. I do not bite my thumb at you, sir, but I bite my thumb, sir. And you can feel the sarcasm in that kind of false respect there. Gregory decides, okay, I'm going to turn the tables on Abraham. Do you quarrel, sir? And again, a bit afraid to say yes. Quarrel, sir? No, sir. If you do, sir, I am for you. That means I will go for you with my sword. I serve as good a man as you. And here it's Abraham's turn to be a bit clever. There is a very sort of flat way of saying this, no better. So your man is as good, but not any better than mine. But there is a room here for an actor to say, no, better. As if to say, no, I serve a better man. And Samson realizes that this tone of voice isn't going to stand up if they're hauled before the prince. And so he backs down completely and he becomes a sentence that means nothing. Well, sir. But then Gregory spots a higher ranking member of their household on his way. And he knows that it's going to be okay to fight. So he tells him, say better, here comes one of my master's kinsmen. So then Samson goes, yes, better, sir. Abraham says, you lie. Samson says, draw if you be men. Gregory, remember thy swashing blow. This is a bit silly because it would be funny to the audience. And they fight. What happens next? And I would like you to do the analysis for these next passages. So Benvolio, from the Montague household, again higher ranking, comes in and he tries to break up the fight. Part fools, put up your swords, you know not what you do. And he beats down their swords. Then Tybalt, who's the higher ranking kinsman from the Capulet household, takes on Benvolio. He sees him with his sword out, which he's been using to try and beat down the swords of the fighting servants. And he says, he sees that he's drawn and he's ready to fight. And Benvolio explains, I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword or manage it to part these men with me. Help me make peace. But then Tybalt says, what? Drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee. Have it, thee coward. What I'd like you to do is think about how Benvolio uses words and his sword to stop the fighting. Then how does Tybalt use words to make Benvolio fight? Underline the words that you think are going to make him fight. Think about whether words are enough by themselves to stop people fighting with swords, and if words are enough by themselves to start the sword fighting. Think about these passages, pause, have a look, do a little bit of thinking, and when you're ready, continue with the workshop. Okay, one exercise that you can do to explore the dynamics of wordplay and swordplay is to look at an adaptation of this scene in the film West Side Story, which adapts Romeo and Juliet to gang warfare in New York in the late 1950s, early 60s. Have a look at how the film substitutes a basketball and a piece of fruit for wordplay. There's almost no speaking at all in the opening meeting of the two gangs. It's very heavy on body movements. Look at how characters battle for control over these objects, just as Samson and Gregory do with words, and later how both households battle over words before they fight with swords. And think about whether there are any similarities. Well, I hope that this was a helpful workshop to you, and I hope that it gave you some good insights about swordplay and wordplay. You can also look at later scenes of sword fights between higher ranking members and how words and swords interact in those scenes as well. Or you can turn to other videos in this playlist to learn more about the way that language functions. Thank you for watching, listening, and participating in this workshop. If you're interested in learning more about what it's like to study English literature at university, you can start with our website. And do feel free to contact us with any questions.